So thank you again for joining us today. We're delighted to have you here with us. We're talking today about the Growing Healthy Food, Growing Healthy Children program operated by SelfHelp International in Ghana. And we have with us Dr. Mary Jane Oakland, who is our nutrition program advisor on the board of directors, and Jessica Crawford, who's our program manager in Ghana, to share some stories and have a conversation. And so this program has been an evolution and really brings together so much of what we do at SelfHelp with empowering women, with focusing on improving agriculture and promoting good nutrition, both in the short term, in that immediate first 1,000 days, as well as long term for the family, working with moms to take care of their babies today and any future individuals that might join their family down the road. And to get us started, Dr. Oakland, you've been so intimately involved with this program from the very beginning. Can you talk to us about why nutrition matters in that first 1,000 days? Let's help us set the stage for why is it that nutrition matters in that first 1,000 days? And what does that look like for our programs in Ghana and how we work with moms and babes during that time period?
Well, for a pregnant woman to grow from embryo to fetus to delivery, that takes a huge amount of nutrients to be able to do that well. And you begin in utero to grow a healthy brain. And basically what all the research has shown us, that you've got these 1,000 days from pregnancy to when the child is 2 years old, that gives you the background for having, if there are too many nutritional insults during that time. In other words, if that just doesn't happen, the woman just does not have the protein, the calories, the iron, the zinc, the vitamin A, all folic acid, all of those components during that time, things will just not get put together as well. And so that actually, for a child that is stunted at 2 years of age, we know that will affect that child for the rest of their lives. I can't feed them after they're 2 years old to make up for those earlier deficits. And so a child that is stunted will not be able to attain in the educational levels that child is genetically programmed to be able to attain, unless I've got that brain grown in those first 1,000 days. And that you can, some wonderful work was done not all that many years ago to look at, from the economic standpoint, with higher stunting rates, the GDP of a developing country is less because they just will always produce less for the rest of their lifetime. So we determine so much during that time. And that's why nutritionists get so, why we are so mother henish about babies that are not growing well. Now, what we have, so it just so happened that a former colleague of mine, who's now at McGill University in Montreal, and another colleague who was at the University of Accra, had just finished some work in 2018. In fact, it wasn't published yet, but we got access to that. And that was where what they had done as far as an intervention meant that they were able to increase length as far as those children were concerned. And that's huge from the nutrition standpoint. You don't need to understand that from the research standpoint, but just to know that it is founded on good research. And what did we find out? Well, we started, and we're still working in Baposo and Cucabuso, which are very poor villages in the Ashanti region, where the main way of livelihood is to be a sharecropper on somebody else's land that's growing cocoa trees. So harvesting those cocoa beans, cleaning those cocoa beans, and selling those, which all happens once a year. And we knew that we had very high stunting rates in those villages. So we went to the villages with the most problems. And basically we do provide them with a supplemental cereal product that is made of QPM and a legume, which is actually peanuts, in a mixture called Tom Brown. And this increases to impact that calorie and protein level for that woman. We've worked with Ghana Health Service because the women in those villages have just minimal prenatal care. So that has come along. What we know is that, and we've tried to increase poultry production in those villages, as well as growing orange flesh sweet potatoes and growing all kinds of vegetables. So one of the things that, and so what we found is that we can replicate what they did, but we're not doing this as a research project. We're doing this for community and personal development because it's self-help. It's that alleviating hunger. So we are working with families who are very food insecure. So some of that is learning how, if you're only going to get paid once a year, how do you learn to financially manage that and manage that well for the family? How else can they, some have, they are little entrepreneurs and they want access to our microcredit program and can start some businesses, small little, but they're in very poor villages. So even petty trading, if everybody is poor and they're in, and so COVID has really impacted it has made them more food insecure, even while we've been providing them excellent nutrition education, that we have been supplementing food for their babies. And what we know is that there are two main hinges as far as that need to be in place so that a child will not be stunted. And one of them is 6 months of exclusive breastfeeding. And that is difficult to do. It's difficult to do beyond because those women need, they are very poor and they have to work in the cocoa harvest, and they want to have, they need to work to be able to provide themselves and their family with food. So that is very difficult. Things that work in this country as far as, pumping and freezing your milk and all that kind of thing that works for women that work in this country, that Baposo has no electricity. So, so when you don't have a refrigerator, when you don't have a freezer, all of these kinds of things that might work in a developed, we have to figure out how to work with them there. So and I'm just rambling, I think, but as far as self-help is concerned, one of the exciting things is that, or for me, is to have the ag and extension development working along in these villages so that we are now growing more food. We've got school children growing vegetables, even getting awards from the government for school gardens. And so places where the ag extension people were not working before, they are, and they are helping those villages so that they solve those problems. So we've been able to, we've been able to inoculate poultry because of the rampantness of Newcastle disease that would just knock out all the indigenous flocks in those, all those indigenous chickens. So we've worked very hard to make that kind of, and it's together. And because it is growing healthy food to growing healthy children. Having a couple of nutritionists on staff, I think it also means that we've got people to do education with the women that we're working with in microcredit. Some of those women, some of them still have very young children, but they would not necessarily be in a growing healthy food program. But to help those women who are now making a little more money so that they use that money well, so that their families are actually better fed. Because just having a little more money does not mean your family is better fed. That's part of the what has been well established in developing countries around the world called the nutrition transition. It's how to, as they incorporate some of those other products within their diet, so that they are not diluting out the quality that was in their native diet. Because wherever you are, Coca-Cola is underpriced, and so there's plenty of pop being consumed in all these countries. So to have and nutrition can also be there working with the farmers when they come into the center for ag extension days. And so we do this cross-cutting as far as so that the women that are learning about nutrition are also learning how to manage the family finances, that they're also figuring out what might be possible for them as beginning entrepreneurs. And we keep going because of the anecdotal things that we keep knowing. I mean, we have data. Obviously in COVID, getting that data has been even more difficult, but we have data. But the thing that really keeps us going are the stories of the women, especially those that have had more than one child before, thought they were experienced moms, came and learned, changed their diet during pregnancy. And that fourth child, then Munira here, she said, my fourth child was born at a healthy weight. And look at that smiling mom, look at that baby growing well. And that's why we keep going. And the more moms that we have with these positive kinds of experiences, one thing that we've learned in COVID is that we don't have to always be. We had to learn because we couldn't be in the villages with our nutritionists quite as often, with as big groups as we had before. We had to change the way we operated. And so we used women in those villages to distribute supplies to the rest of the food and supplies to the rest of their group. And we are working more with lactation coaches to help those new moms. And this will be general coaching because we've got two main areas. I mean, it's lactation and keeping them breastfeeding long enough so that baby can develop enough so that their GI tract can handle something other than mother's milk. And when they're just weaning to a thin starch-based cereal at 3 months, that will not support growth. And so that's, and then the next, so that weaning is really, really critical to get that weaning to be done well. So they've got protein sources to serve that child as you're decreasing that the amount of that mother's milk, which is that excellent protein. That's really hard. And again, that coaching, and we know that because we are doing different, we are asking them to feed their children differently than they were fed, that we need to teach not only the mothers, but the grandmothers why we are doing this, to enlist them in that help. So those are some of the changes. I have a question here about why have we gone away from 6 months exclusive breastfeeding in the US? Well, we should not. I mean, if it had been up to the nutritionists in the US, we wouldn't have. That's still the best that we have. And it's, you know, it's 6 months is a lot of, that's just a lot of time. And so with the hurry of getting women back into the workforce, some places are much more, they are much more, you know, some corporations really help out the nursing moms, make it possible. The company my daughter-in-law worked with, it was the company that got her an electric pump. But that doesn't happen for a lot of women. So that's the problem in the US. Problem in a village in Ghana is that I cannot safely feed that child with formula. We have experience, we've tried that, where we've had teen moms that gave birth and then left the village to go back to school. When teen pregnancy started going up during COVID, through our teen girls clubs, we've been doing some work, taking and listening to the village, how they were upset, providing culturally sensitive in culturally and religious sensitively ways, as far as family planning is concerned. So that's what our whole self-help staff can do, is that we work on the whole kinds of things. It's not just people counting grams of protein. You know, we've got some that can do that very well, but it's coupled with the ag. It's coupled with that family finance education. It is coupled with the specialists for the teen girls and empowering women. So we put that all together. So even though I'm talking about growing healthy food, growing healthy children, it really is across that whole spectrum. And I think that that's what makes self-help a very different kind of NGO agency working in the developing countries. We go and we stay and we work with the communities and the people we have. So.
Dr. Oakland, that's such a beautiful way to put it. I mean, you've talked about so many different elements of this program that is really the culmination and integration of so much of that work that we do. You talked about the importance of economically empowering women with their own financial resources to be able to support their families, the importance of being able to grow sufficient food in the community, and particularly high nutrition food. So whether that's vitamin A, sweet potatoes that are biofortified with that additional vitamin A, whether that's legumes, for high protein or high protein maize or other types of foods that contribute to nutrition and dietary diversity. I've learned so much from you about the importance of not just making sure that people are not hungry and well fed, but well nourished, and how crucial that is. And it's so clear through this program how that all integrates together, and introducing animal source protein as well, and supporting moms and babes to have sufficient eggs to be able to consume, and making sure that all of those foods are locally appropriate and can be sustainably cultivated. What you just highlighted was that long-term vision and that importance of sustainability through this program. And certainly one of the elements that's so crucial to how SelfHelp operates and partners with communities is a focus on the short term, meeting people where they're at, and also that long-term sustainability. And of course, in this program, we're talking about that short term, we just have that tiny little window of 1,000 days to grow a healthy baby, to help them learn and earn long term. But we're also focused on that long-term community sustainability. And so I wanted to ask my colleague Jessica to talk a little bit more about that long-term vision for the communities that we're working with. What does that look like both today and for the future? And you might have to share a little bit more about where we're at as well, as far as, where are we at and where are we going?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think both of you really alluded to this, like how you ensure sustainability in any program, right? But specifically looking at this, like we kind of bill the Growing Healthy Food, Growing Healthy Children program as a nutrition program. And that is where, it was born from concerns around nutrition, but ultimately the program is actually this nexus of all of self-help programming working in the community. And like any, again, sustainable approach to development in any community, whether that's here in the US or in Ghana, you have to look at how systems integrate with each other. And the communities that we're working in, specifically talking about Raposo and Kukubusu, are really cut off from a lot of the resources that exist within the country. So not necessarily visited by community healthcare workers. The Ministry of Food and Agriculture extension agents are not always able to get there. And some of that logistically, it is really difficult to get to these communities. And part of it's just the demand on their time and the resources that they have. So SelfHelp's involvement in these communities really comes at this from all angles. Not only is that how we ensure it's effective in the moment, day to day, but it's also how we ensure that sustainability. So our ag program, working with farmers to ensure that they can grow the quality protein maize that not only feeds their family, but perhaps is provided to others in the community that don't have access to that. Our microcredit program, providing credit and access to cash for folks who can't access a bank because logistically you just can't get to it. And also they don't have a lot of resources to provide as collateral. So banks see it as a higher risk. And with SelfHelp, we're willing to take that on and work with women to provide those loans and see a lot of success from that. Our repayment rate in our microcredit program is between 96 and 98%, usually closer to 98%. So really it's the bank's loss. They would be glad to have a repayment rate around that rate. So again, agriculture, we're working with farmers. Microcredit, we're providing that access to credit and cash for folks to grow their businesses. And then we are working with youth in the communities as well, because that is the future of that community. So in our youth ag program, talking about farming and talking about rearing small animals or raising poultry, we're working with the teen girls in schools in these communities to ensure they stay in school, because we know the longer a girl stays in school, the later she's having a baby or starting a family, because she's continuing on in her education. So all of these things coming together through this nutrition program, through the Growing Healthy Food, Growing Healthy Children program, is again how we ensure its effectiveness day to day, but also ensure its sustainability in the long term.
Just we've Got a question in the chat here about, are Ghanaian mothers able to maintain their weight and health during that 6-month period to maintain their milk supply from the time that the child is born up to that 6-month time frame, which is the target for weaning. The target for exclusive breastfeeding, of course, is in that 6 months. Can you talk to us about the different ways that SelfHelp's nutrition program supports the moms during that time frame, particularly some of that training and what we're seeing about the experiences the moms are having related to the ability to exclusively breastfeed?
Yeah, totally. Like Dr. Oakland mentioned, there are just some kind of lifestyle challenges that interrupt that process for moms. But what we do ensure within the program is that, and it kind of touches on how we're really addressing needs in the short term as well, is we do provide, like Dr. Oakland had mentioned, a porridge supplement, a high protein porridge supplement, and boiled eggs to mothers and weaning children. And mothers who might be struggling with malnutrition themselves or anemia themselves do have access to additional supplement. Because likely they're just not getting the calories they need and the nutrients they need at home. And it makes it that much harder if they give birth and they're not healthy and that baby's not healthy. You just have a lot of ground to make up. So we are trying to provide access to some of those immediate resources that help them, again, meet their day-to-day needs and ensure that the baby is growing properly in utero, so that when they give birth, there's a healthy baby to work with from there. But in addition to just that supplement, we're also, like Nora mentioned, providing a lot of nutrition education, which, again, like I mentioned, a lot of the 2 communities that we're working in just don't necessarily have access to like information channels or resources within the rest of the country. And so providing information on what an appropriate, nutrient-rich diet is for themselves and their kids, that's locally led, so it's our Ghanaian staff that's providing that education. They're Ghanaian nutritionists that understand the food systems within Ghana and what grows where and how to grow it properly and how to incorporate that into your diet. So we're having the conversations, do a lot of recipe demonstrations throughout the year that uses this quality protein maize, and it uses soybeans, but it also uses other locally available vegetables or crops. So incorporating greens into stews, or talking about why consuming eggs is important, and really trying to change some of the norms and behavior around what's eaten and when and how it's eaten. And we really, again, we provide the supplements in the short term, but it's the long game, right? Like that kind of behavior change and that kind of norm shift takes quite a bit of time. As adults, trying to incorporate new foods into our day-to-day life is difficult, right? Like we don't always do it eagerly. So we kind of come at it in some different and creative ways. Last year, our programs coordinator in Ghana suggested starting to distribute an egg a week in a couple different kindergarten classrooms. And we know that 1 egg a week isn't going to, shift the nutritional status of these, kindergartners, but it's getting them used to eating it. It's getting it so maybe they go home and they ask their parents about eggs. And so the household starts to become a little bit more interested in consuming eggs. The mothers or parents of those children in school, if they have additional children, they're already used to their kids asking about eggs, so just kind of working within the family unit or within the community to have these conversations and provide the education or access to information that just hasn't existed before. And frankly, women are really eager to be hearing it and to be learning it. And they get so excited when their kids are excited to eat eggs and they think it's really fun. Or, we are doing an orange flesh a sweet potato food demonstration, and they can't get enough of the juice or the smoothie, we're making. It's fun to introduce new foods and kind of see the eagerness that people have to learn about those things.
You know,
when I can stay in the community nutrition role, um, um, we've got some really, I mean, we really have made some changes. I mean, some of them are small. It isn't like I wouldn't want to make more, but we really have. When I come at this from the part of my training that's related to healthcare and medical systems and some of that kind of thing, then it's most of these women are delivering at home. Most of our women, many of our women, that's another thing that we have done. We've gotten more women to get prenatal care than ever have been in these villages before. We know that regular vaccinations for babies and young children are happening in these villages, and that did not happen before. So our presence and SelfHelp's work in those villages has made Ghana Health Service take another look at how they could, I don't want to say that we shamed them into doing that, but I mean, we gathered people. So they were able to come and work with a group of people, and they have responded. These villages are too far for a woman in labor to get to the hospital where they are assigned. We've in one of our villages, they have now built a small health center that could be set up with a midwife, but it's 2 years on, it still has nothing. It's not operational. So other than the hospitals that are too far to get to them on the roads that they've got, so they're, and that's another thing that SelfHelp does, is it does advocacy work with Ghana Health Service. It has done a lot of advocacy work as far as education for girls with the Ministry of Education. So that's another way in which we are working with people to make things better.
Yeah, that's so crucial, because we recognize where our skills and talents lie, and our program officers are such skilled and talented community development officers. And there are things that are outside of the scope of what we can do at SelfHelp that require that systemic change. And so we can help facilitate those conversations. And that's something that is actively happening. Jessica, do you want to speak more to some of that more system level and the way that we engage with other partners so that collectively we can do more than what we could do on our own?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, truly, it's just another piece of that like sustainability model, in that, in some regard, it may be easier or more straightforward for us to implement or hire someone ourselves to administer vaccinations in the community, because we know we're going, and they, we know when we expect them to be on the clock, or, whatever that might look like. But ultimately, if there is a system that exists in Ghana to provide that resource, the most sustainable solution is going to be trying to connect the communities with that resource that exists within the country. So to be able to, like I mentioned earlier, like Ghana Health Service has community health workers that do go out into rural areas and address health needs or provide vaccinations or immunizations. But when Ghana Health Service themselves are lacking in resources that they might need, it's really difficult for them to get everywhere they need to go. It's just not possible. So if SelfHelp can be a connector in that and say, hey, you know what, on the third Tuesday of every month, we're already going to Boposo. We passed right by your clinic. We could pick up the community health worker. They could ride with us in the truck and provide that immunization once a month. And they were eager to do that. Like they, isn't that no one, wanted to go to Boposo or Kukubusa. It's just, it's difficult. Logistically, it's really, really challenging. So to provide that, it's the means for them to get there. And again, our staff are like professional community development workers, and they're really great at motivating attendance at meetings and getting folks to show up and come together. And so they were having incredible groups of women show up for their trainings, and the health workers were like, this is great. We haven't seen a group like this come together, if we're just coming to provide an immunization. So they had a large group, a willing group, and then there was a health worker there to provide the immunization. So partnerships like that just not only provide a service that folks need in the community, but also just help to ensure that sustainability and the integration of those services with already existing mechanisms in the country. We see the same kind of partnerships and conversations happening with the Ministry of Food and Agriculture and extension agents, having our extension specialists connect individuals who we might be working with in the community with Ministry of Food and Agriculture extension agents who have access to a wider array of resources than what we might have at SelfHelp. We have, if someone's interested in into cocoa production, we don't necessarily have a lot of information on controlling weeds in cocoa production, right? But we know the Ministry of Food and Agriculture agent who does, or who has more connections in cocoa production. So being able to provide those connections for folks is a huge piece of what we're doing to make sure the needs that exist for community members are being met.
Just taking a step back and looking at the program in the last year in particular, like Dr. Oakland, you've said all along, we are not academics. We're not running an academic study. We are working with families and meeting them where they're at. So we're actively working to continue to enhance the ways that we're providing services to community members on an ongoing basis. So as we learn more, we adapt the program and shift it to make sure that it's actually responsive. Some of that has looked like in cocoa producing communities, adapting how and when we do trainings, recognizing that there are different pressures that moms face at different times in the agricultural cycle. And so that's just one example of what we've seen in last year. The program is now right about that 1,000 days as far as the duration that we've been working with families. And so we're constantly bringing in new people and supporting them on an ongoing basis. But COVID has changed things in the last year. COVID added a new dimensions that we were adapting to. What does that look like as far as the status of COVID and COVID vaccines in Ghana, and also how that affects the families that we're working with?
Yeah, so COVID has been a long journey in Ghana, just like it has been, throughout the rest of the world. I was in Ghana last March when things started to close down. So I came home early, and pretty shortly after that, they put certain parts of the country on varying levels of lockdown and shut things down, mostly in major cities. Since then, it's kind of been up and down, as it has been here, with what restrictions are and where they're at. Hasn't been a complete shutdown since last summer, I don't believe, but there are mask mandates in place. COVID is still very present there, although I think it's been kind of centered in, as far as where they're testing at and where they're getting data from, has been centered on like major cities. So Accra, some in Kumasi, some major cities up north. And whether it's because the testing isn't happening or the information is not getting out of these areas, but you're not seeing the prevalence in rural areas and rural communities as much. Vaccines are available in Ghana. Ghana is actually the first recipient of the COVAX, is that the name, right? The international kind of vaccine consortium. So they received the first shipment of those vaccines. Again, most of those distribution centers have been in major cities, but folks do have access to the vaccine if they're interested. And there's a couple different options available to them. I think they have Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca, Sputnik. I'm not remembering which others, but As far as in our communities, the impact that had last year was really hard. We had to make a lot of adaptations to the way that we did our work. When your work is to be in person with folks in large groups of people, providing trainings, or being one-on-one with people up close and working with them in the field or in their home to provide education, COVID really disrupted that. But it was also really neat to see the way that our teams adapted, in that we had been working for a very long time with these communities and have an incredible rapport with the community members. In addition, have been working on kind of identifying, working really closely with different community leaders in all of the communities and the different areas that we work with. So while, yeah, our staff couldn't necessarily travel as consistently as they were before, or gather people together in the way they were before, we still had really regular communication with people on how things were going and who needed what resources. And those community leaders were able to mobilize groups within the community and continue to provide training or have conversations based on, information our program officers were providing. Our nutrition staff really had to adapt how they gauged the nutrition status of babies. So they really transitioned to identifying that more visually, which more room for error, but we were still able to sit down, spaced out with the mother and her baby, and visually identify if someone was struggling, or have a conversation with them because they have a trusting relationship. So mom's able to share what was going on at home. I think Dr. Oakland mentioned it earlier, but they had the year before kind of identified these like accountability groups within the Growing Healthy Food, Growing Healthy Children program. So it was a leader in each of those groups that was able to continue distributing supplements to all of the community members. Our nutrition staff, when it was safe to travel, but still not safe to gather in groups, did hand washing demonstrations at all of the group leaders' homes by building a really simple little hand washing station that uses a plastic jug and a pulley system. It's really simple and uses resources that are available. They kind of built a demo model at group leaders' homes, and then other community members were able to see that or have conversations about what that looks like or how they build it themselves. So because we have great rapport with the staff and going to have a great rapport with these community members, and we've been working with community leaders already, we were still able to maintain those streams of conversation and connection and provide resources. But it did, like Nora alluded to it, we weren't able to gather data in the same way that we were, but our priority is those conversations with mothers. Yes, we want the data, we want the information, but most importantly, we were able to continue to provide that education.
I really want to point out that, if that commodity prices have really risen. And so that has put a huge pressure as far as food security, I would probably say throughout the country. But in some of our areas where people have not had much access to land in the past, so haven't been growing as much, that has put them at much more risk. Every picture I see that is recent out of Ghana, they are thinner than they were. Like that, we just saw that as I look at the last pictures that I've seen for teen girls in those uniforms, they are thinner. So I am just guessing that we're seeing a fair amount of, I think food insecurity has risen with COVID. And so that's why what we're doing in those villages continues to be absolutely crucial. If we are frustrated with supply chain issues, we can't imagine what they are by the time you get to the absolute end of the road in Boposo. So I just want to say that, the challenges are great. We've always known, and we've learned so much from the women. of how to make this program work. Like, we didn't know that all our women were going to lose weight during cocoa harvesting, that the babies were going to lose weight. So how did you make it different? So we know that we are running out of time here and have talked. And we've tried to talk a little bit about, it's going to be a while before we ever get COVID vaccine into all those villages, healthcare into all of those villages, and we'll keep working on that. So,
Dr. Oakland, it's so crucial, all of these things that you're talking about the challenges that are faced by moms and babes. There are a lot of barriers, whether it's accessing healthcare or being able to give birth in a hospital or in a formal setting with a skilled or trained birth attendant. Barriers to community nutrition that are exacerbated by COVID and by supply chain issues and by inflation. There's a big need. And so anyone who feels so inspired, we'd invite you to make a gift to support this work. But I want to make sure that we focus on where we're going as well. There's no shortage of need, but our team is skilled and ready to meet it and rise to it, and they're eager to do so. Dr. Oakland, when you think about, there are so many challenges and you think about the road ahead, what gives you hope? What inspires you to continue on this path as we think about what the future holds?
Oh, just those moms and babes, and where we've been able to see that we've made changes in their lives. Then you keep going. Absolutely. I will tell the story on myself, that first wave of data that we got, I wanted it to all be perfect. And so when I took it to Dr. Colcraft in Accra, she said, so how are you doing? I said, well, we've just analyzed. So she said, let me see your numbers. Just as we would as nutrition professionals. And I thought, oh, and she said to me, these are wonderful numbers. You are, she said, as a researcher, as I would pick villages, we would, as other NGOs in this country pick villages to work with, they would not work with the villages that SelfHelp is working with because of the level of poverty. So we would pick villages that were a couple of levels up as far as those SES indicators would be, because it's easier to get those results. So the results that you have gotten there, she said, I've been looking at them and I am absolutely amazed. And so that made me realize, it made me realize where we were actually working in Ghana, how to look differently at what we would say was success. And so that I can really, the mom with the fourth child that we were just looking at, so that I can really hear what she is saying and know that this program is making that difference. And so I just want to make that difference for more moms and babies in rural areas in Ghana. That is my joy. And we can, and for those of you that are, that know that we've got a Nicaragua component of this, we've now been able, I worked very early in 2007, and in Nicaragua, to work in anything that looks like healthcare, you really can't. But we have absolutely got nutrition folded into to the women's finance program as well as the ag program, and we're growing biofortified beans, we're growing fortified rice, we're doing so that nutrition across the board, how that works, these programs that work with families. It's exciting to me, keeps me going. So,
well, I find it encouraging and exciting too. And do want to invite those on the call today to join us. And so a couple of ways that we are looking for your support are in the form of technical reviewers. If you have expertise in a particular area, whether it's nutrition or agriculture or other elements of food security, we're looking for technical reviewers on our grant applications. And so please let us know if you would be interested. We're also looking for board members, particularly with nutrition expertise. And so if that is an area that interests you, if you have some time to share and advice to offer on a regular basis, we are recruiting for board members. And we also invite you to make a donation. And if you're in a position to do so, to make a financial gift to support this integrated work. We really appreciate everyone taking the time today. And we will stay on for a few more minutes to take any questions or comments. Jessica, I don't want to cut off your opportunity to share with us what you see as what gives you hope as you look ahead.
I mean, I think Dr. Oakland spoke to quite a bit of it, but I find it very exciting from a program perspective, just how all of our activities are integrating, and you really are seeing and hearing the impact of that, you know, agriculture is working with nutrition programming, is working with microcredit clients. And I just think that has a potential for some really cool impact at a community level and in partnership with those communities.
I'm really encouraged by the ways that our staff in Ghana is growing as well. I mean, we really have really high caliber talent in Ghana. And when we talk about COVID hitting and Jessica had to, on short notice, return to the US earlier than we expected, that didn't mean the program stopped, because our team in Ghana is almost 30 strong. Jessica is one of many people that works on the Ghana programs, and the only one based here in the US. The majority of the work that gets done every single day is done by our local staff, whether they're in Ghana or in Nicaragua. They're the ones that know the communities and are the ones carrying forward the work every day. And then many of us on the call get to support those efforts and join together in that process. But certainly there's the ones that are carrying it forward every day, regardless of what circumstances might be faced in the communities. They show up in various ways every day. Dr. Oakland, thank you for joining us today for this conversation. Jessica, thank you for joining us today for the conversation. Everyone who called in and took your lunch hour to join us, we really, really appreciate you taking the time to learn and find different ways to support. We will stay on the call to take any further questions. We are going to wrap up and end the video recording at this point. So thank you everyone for joining us. If you have any other questions, you can raise your hand or take yourself on mute. We'd be happy to talk further. But for those that are looking at the clock and have other business to attend to, thank you for joining us today. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. That's a win.